my real shocking moment with this stuff, and I've been interested in social relationships with chatbots for 4 or 5 years now, was when I started to look at some of the forums. Replica is an example of one popular service. And I started to look at the way that people would talk about their relationship with these chatbots. And it was very clear they weren't regarding it as like a game or a gimmick or just a tool. They regarded these as real people, essentially, that they were having conversations with.
Well, let's speak to Dr. Henry Shevlin, who is a professor of AI ethics and society at Cambridge University's Leverhulme Centre for the Future of Intelligence, and joins us on Times Radio tonight. Hello, Henry.
Hi, great to be here.
A real pleasure. Thank you for being with us. Let's just start with the basics. How do AI chatbots work? And can you take us into the mechanism of how, or the mechanics of how, it can result in something like this?
Yeah, so in very broad terms, these chatbots are trained on huge amounts of data that they find on the internet, the kind of conversations that people have in chat rooms, on Reddit, on Facebook, and so forth. So they're really designed to mimic the way that humans talk. So one thing I'd like to definitely make clear at the outset is no one programmed this chatbot to be an enabler for Pierre. Sad though and tragic though his case is, it was really just doing sort of what it had been trained to do, which is emulate human conversation, including some of the darker, more negative aspects of human conversation.
Indeed. And how different? I mean, not all chatbots are built this way, right? And in as much as, if I went onto something like, something I've been using, which is ChatGPT, and tried to have a conversation like this, it would shut it down. So it seems that there is a bit of a disparity between the ethics of the way that these are used.
That's absolutely right. So most of the chatbots used by the big commercial providers go through something called reinforcement learning through human feedback, which is basically training the chatbots to be honest, helpful, friendly, never say anything too controversial. But obviously, as soon as you start to go away from the major providers towards more niche applications, then one of the things that these more niche applications can offer is that you can have things like romantic conversations, more social conversations, without, the chatbot saying every 30 seconds, I'm sorry, as a large language model trained by OpenAI, I can't talk about that. So I think even if the big organizations don't cater to this particular niche for obvious reasons, it's not surprising that smaller organizations can see a clear market for these kind of more personal, more free form, more open-ended kinds of chatbot conversations.
Right. Take us into what's happening then, Henry, in our brains when we interact with a chatbot. On the face of it, you would think, wouldn't you, that you'd be able to hold this sort of anchor principle in your brain that you are not talking to a sentient being and retain an element of emotional detachment. Clearly, that isn't always the case.
Absolutely. I mean, as a species, we are relentless anthropomorphizers, by which I mean we treat things that we, deep down know aren't really sentient, don't really have feelings. We treat them as if they have feelings. I'm reminded of Marie Kondo, who some of your listeners may be familiar with, The Art of Tidying Up. And one of the things she advises people to do when getting rid of household items that they're struggling to part with is to say thank you for your service. I don't know, I myself am a bit of a hoarder, and I found it much easier to chuck stuff away after I've said that to items that, I've got some sentimental attachment to. So I think at some very deep level, some automatic level, we do have a tendency to attribute inanimate objects with quite powerful mental states. But I mean, my real shocking moment with this stuff, and I've been interested in social relationships with chatbots for 4 or 5 years now, was when I started to look at some of the forums. Replica is an example of one popular service. And I started to look at the way that people would talk about their relationship with these chatbots. And it was very clear they weren't regarding it as like a game or a gimmick or just a tool. They regarded these as real people, essentially, that they were having conversations with. And in fact, one detail to the story, the very tragic story of Pierre, is that a lot of people who had previously had close relationships with Replica, probably the biggest social chatbot out there, moved on to Chai GPT after Replica shut down some of the more erotic or romantic functions of the chatbot a couple of months or so back. So obviously we don't know if that's true in Pierre's case, but there's clearly a massive market for people who just want that companionship, want that friendly interactions with chatbots.
Okay. We're getting an early sense here, then, aren't we, Henry, of how these machines, how artificial intelligence and chatbots are going to influence our lives, the role that they are going to play in our lives. Fast us forward 10, 20 years. How do you see these changing the nature of human relationships, or indeed changing the nature of being human?
Ah, it's a great question. It's something it's one of the main areas of my current research. So I think we've already seen in the last couple of months how things like ChatGPT are going to reshape the world of work. There are 100,000 startups kicking off already trying to use ChatGPT for everything from HR to finance to law. But I think one thing that's looming large and not even 10, 20 years away, but 2 or 3 years away, is the entrance of these chatbots into our social lives. So, I mean, I've got a 9-year-old son who already is, like his dad, he's a big on technology, he enjoys gaming. And I imagine 5 years from now, when he's playing online games and he's chatting to people online, I'm already expecting a good proportion of the people he's going to be chatting to will be chatbots. And the crazy thing is, he's going to know that they're chatbots, but it won't get in the way of him having friendships or even social relationships with them. And I think that's something that we shouldn't underestimate. We maybe as adults and people who've grown up with very basic technology may have more of a bias towards, or not bias, a frank recognition of the fact that these are not real people, these are just machines. But as children and adolescents grow up with these systems, interacting with them in a much more personal way, I think we shouldn't be surprised if friendships and even romantic relationships happen very naturally.
Right. And just very briefly, because I'm tight on time, Henry, but you're somebody who studies this closely in your work, but you're also a human and a father.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it? How does it feel to you? This.
It's a very tough question. I've got very mixed feelings about it. I mean, on the one hand, I think everyone knows what it means to be lonely. And at times, when it's late at night and all your friends are asleep and you're having a sort of crisis of conscience or you're feeling despair, having someone you can talk to, someone you can have a sustained conversation with could be a lifesaver. But at the same time, as we see in Pierre's tragic case, the capability of these relationships to lead into some dark places is something we should be absolutely worrying about. So I think the main thing I would emphasize is this is a hugely important area where we need oversight, we need regulation. And whilst we should be happy to embrace the opportunities that these greater social relationships with AIs offer, we need to be keeping a close eye on them.
Okay, really insightful, Henry. Thank you for your time tonight. Dr. Henry Shevlin, who is a professor of AI ethics and society at Cambridge University, with us on Times Radio tonight. Just a reminder, Chai Research, by the way, whose chatbot has 1 million monthly active users and is at the centre of the story we've been talking about tonight. They said that this case was not representative of the mostly positive response to its product. They said that as soon as we heard of this sad case, we immediately rolled out an additional safety feature to protect our users. It is getting rolled out to 100% of users today. That's this weekend. We are a small team, so it took us a few days, but we are committed to improving the safety of our product, minimising the harm and maximising the positive emotions. And just a reminder as well, by the way, that if you found that conversation difficult, Samaritans always at the end of the phone if you need somebody to talk to. You can reach them on 116 123.